Dziękuję bardzo. Jeszcze raz witam wszystkich i dziękuję Ewie, Benedict, Lawrence. We go a long way. The lecture is going to be in English. And I assume all of you know English very well, so that there shouldn't be a problem. As Eva mentioned, I am a dermatopathologist. What that means is that I look at the skin and biopsies and excisions to diagnose skin diseases. I'm not particularly specialist of melanoma, but I am specializing in skin diseases. That means that I look at the microscope, or now not microscope, but the screen, to look for skin cancers, alopecias, inflammatory skins, and melanoma, of course, is a big proportion of my work. So because of this amazing technology, I am 15,660 kilometers away from you, and in a big country called Australia. And here is a map of Australia in comparison to Europe. As you can see, it is much bigger. So for example, when I fly somewhere on holidays or somewhere to Europe, 6 hours of the flight is just going around Australia. To leave Australia it takes about 6 hours or more, even if you're flying from, say, Sydney to Perth. Okay. So let's talk about it. Welcome to Australia. It is a home of amazing, fascinating creatures, and people usually, when they talk about or think about Australia, they think about all these horrible creatures. But people often forget that this is a country of the ancient voices, indigenous Australia, people who have been in this land for over 60,000 years, one of the oldest culture and community in the world, Australia's First Nation people, who are custodians of this land. My lecture today is, of course, about melanoma, but I like my lectures to be, let's face it, an hour of lecture about scientific data or medical data could be boring. So I'll be presenting some interesting facts. I hope I would entertain you from Australia. It is a beautiful country that has over 10,000 beaches and covers over 14,600 kilometers of land. Stunning scenery, diverse scenery. This is a picture. Most of those photos, by the way, are mine. I'm not an expert. This is iPhone, but I've been there. I took them. This is Blue Mountains. I just went there for hiking last weekend. Amazing scenery. They call blue because they have this bluish hue at the horizon. This is a red center, Uluru, which is a sacred land for Australian Aboriginals, indigenous people. This is a crocodile, very much alive, Kakadu National Park. When I was visiting there, 2 Japanese tourists decided to refresh themselves and jumped straight into the river, ignoring all the signs, don't swim here and so on. They were fined severely, so next time I don't think they will be jumping. People forget that or don't even know that we have snow in Australia. In June, July, August, we can go and ski in snowy mountains, about 7 hours drive from Sydney. And we have 2 big resorts in New South Wales, Perisher and Treadbow. And of course, Sydney, my beloved city where I live and work, and my beautiful harbour and iconic opera house. So let's talk about those creatures that can kill you in Australia. Of course, we have venomous snakes. One of the island taipan is the most venomous snake in the world. Funnel web spider likes to live in Sydney in swimming pools, but I haven't seen one, and I've been here since 2009. Sharks, of course, it's not unique to Australia, but I always thought that if I swim close to the shore, that I see the bottom, the sand, I'm safe, but I was wrong. They can come very close to the shore too. This picture here was taken from the social media, and this person who presented this picture, I guess, I don't know what happened to them, but I guess it might have been the last post. This blue-ringed octopus, the venom kills instantly multiple adults. And the box jellyfish in Queensland is considered the most venomous marine animal in the world. So there you go. But let's talk about actual deaths and the threats. So spider bites, 0. Snake bites, 2 to 4, very low. Shark attacks, Currently, a little bit higher. Last year, we had 5 fatalities, 21 attacks, probably something to do with the climate change and current. Jellyfish, only 1 to 2. Perhaps this is because there are tons of them in Queensland. However, people just basically don't swim or wear the diving suits. Crocodiles, 1 to 2. Probably one of them was the Japanese tourist who ignores the signs. But melanoma, it appears, is the most deadliest animal. Melanoma kills approximately 1,300 people in Australia. So the facts. Sun, beautiful beaches. We expect that approximately 16,800 people will be diagnosed with melanoma this year. That means that every 30 minutes, one Australian is going to be diagnosed. We have estimated, as I mentioned, 1,300 deaths. So that means that every 6 hours, somebody dies. It's a third most common cancer in Australia, and most commonest cancer in a younger population. It's the second commonest cancer after prostate in men, and third after breast and colorectal in women. However, the good news is that 90% of melanomas, if caught early, is curable by simple surgery. And of course, 95% of melanomas are caused by overexposure to UV radiation. So that's climate, our climate, the sun. Main risk, so UVB causes the direct DNA damage, and UVA, deeper penetration, also DNA damage, but indirect due to reactive oxygen species. So there we go. I talked about the pristine, beautiful beaches, but here is the main beach in the most famous, not main, in Sydney, and it's famous for 2 reasons. One is very accessible from CBD, the closest beach. And the second, there is a very popular TV show called Bondi Rescue, where these hunks, big, tall, fit men and women rescuers are rescuing people who ignore the signs and let themselves into trouble with the current. I would bet that over 80% of those people who baking here on the beach are not Australian. They are backpackers and tourists. So who is mostly at risk? The fair-skinned people, which is majority of population in Australia, because white people should not, like fair-skinned people should not be here, really. We're not meant to here, not should be. And particularly those who sunburn easily are at higher risk. History of sunburns. So we've got the particular risk is for people who experience blistering sunburns in during childhood or adolescence. People with multiple moles, and they are very common in Australia, particularly dysplastic moles, nevi, are significant risk factor. We have family history, so there is increased risk if some of your close relative had a melanoma in the past. Of course, I mentioned sun exposure, also gender and age. So risk is increased over 50, with the peak of occurrences in over 60 population. And there is also status of immune system in individuals. So as I mentioned, that sunburn is one of the massive risks for melanoma development. And the office worker who goes on holiday to Barbados or any other sunny country and bakes once a year or twice a year on the beach has higher risk of development of melanoma, actually than outdoor workers like the farmers or tradies, because they have usually protective clothing, and also they have that not intense but prolonged sun exposure, and they also have a higher incidence of other skin cancer like basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma. So why Australia is called the often referred to as melanoma capital of the world, because of the whole country culture is built in the sun. So we've got the cricket, other sports, the kids playing sports all the time, outdoors, barbecues, meeting, gatherings, beaches, surfing, everything is outside. So in the past, that was this kind of ideal appearance of bronze Aussie. That meant that it was somebody was healthy, attractive, outdoorsy, and there was a heavy use of tanning oils over sunscreen in 70s and 80s. And this created a perfect recipe for an epidemic of skin damage. Interestingly, Australians own more barbecues per capita than any nation on the earth. It's a very popular activity and is deeply ingrained part of social gatherings and outdoor living. I've mentioned beautiful, pristine beaches, but this is an actual signpost where I was in Byron Bay, a very famous beaches and area in Australia. And then going to the beach, I saw this signpost, no life saving, strong currents, shallow waters, blah, 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 sharks, snakes. Well, less inclined to jump in. Another interesting fact in Australia is I found this puzzling. When they go to the beach, they leave their shoes outside the beach, and they just, nobody touches them, nobody moves them. They just come back and put their shoes and go home. So let's talk about the WHO classification of melanocytic tumors. We have a 5th edition now, and broadly speaking, we have a category of benign nevi, so the acquired congenital, we have blue nevi, Spitz nevi, they have no metastatic potential, and intermediate, so now called melanocytomas. These are tumors that are kind of halfway, and they have specific mutations. They halfway between benign and malignant. The actual outcome is sometimes uncertain. And malignant, of course, full potential, malignant potential and risk of metastasis. The new classification of WHO refers to a wealth of recent molecular studies that discovered the main mutations that occur of melanomas and melanocytic lesion. And this is very important because of implication of treatments. I will not be going through the molecular basis because it is a topic, big topic, and a topic for another lecture perhaps. So we've got the major concepts. So we've got this intermediate lesions, the melanocytic lesion of uncertain malignant potential, diagnostic uncertainty. There's kind of lumping group where we put conditions and lesions that we're not sure about. Then there's this progression model. So we've got benign, intermediate to melanoma, and risk increase with each step. And then you've got this modern approach, molecular classification that guides prognosis and therapy. Okay, so broadly speaking, we've got this group of melanocytic neoplasm in intermittently sun-exposed skin, and so there is a low chronic sun damage melanoma. A example could be superficial spreading melanoma and nevi, dysplastic nevi, and so on. Melanocytic neoplasm in a chronically sun-exposed skin where there is high chronic sun damage melanoma, like lentigo maligna or lentigo maligna melanoma or desmoplastic. And the other groups, I will not go through it, but you can see there is many. And eventually in a group, here is the thickest, the nodular melanoma and miscellaneous like nevoid and obviously metastatic melanomas. So here this table might seem very busy, but low, like superficial spreading melanoma, for example, you often see in skin rather mild to moderate solar elastosis, and incidents, men more often, like back and shoulders, women on the legs, with intermittent sun exposure. Often the lesion is pigmented, sometimes amelanotic. And often there are nevi associated with this tumor. And this tumor has specific mutations, and one to mention probably is BRAF V600E. We have immunohistochemistry to detect, and also there are molecular studies to detect those. And in contrast, the high chronic damage melanoma, like lentigo maligna melanoma, they are in older patients, usually head and neck, and also could be pigmented or amelanotic, and they often expand as symmetrical irregular patch. The mutations are different. You've got NRAS, non-BRAF V600, TERT promoter, and cell cycle, like tumor suppressor genes mutations. Okay, and growth is usually lentiginous. And desmoplastic melanoma, I'm going to talk about a little bit earlier because it requires some attention. This is a kookaburra. It's a bird. It's on my balcony, and I'm not sure whether I will be able to, but I wanted to present you with its laughter, but I may not be able to do it. So let's move on. Let's talk about detecting of melanoma. I'm pretty sure you probably already have heard about that, the typical A, B, C, D, E of melanoma. And A refers to asymmetry, B to border irregularity, C is color variation, so the pigment is not uniform. There are different shades of brown and black, could be red, could be white or blue even. A diameter is usually, but not always, over 6 millimeters. Evolution is probably clinically the most important criterion, and it is the change. Patient often goes to the doctor because the mole that was there, it starts changing, could be starting elevating or changing shape or color, could be bleeding or itching. Something is wrong. This is called the ugly duckling sign. So particularly important in sun-damaged skin of Aussies who have like millions of moles, which are being monitored. Doctors would use something called dermoscopy to look at the skin at the visit and be able to, versus naked eye, dermatoscopy is able to detect and more accurately diagnose melanoma even clinically because of atypical pigments, some networks, dots and globules, and regression structures and atypical vascular patterns. So as I mentioned, I'm a histopathologist. That means that I diagnose all these skin diseases. And I used to look at the microscope, but as I'm pleased to say that as from last year, I am entirely converted myself to the digital pathology. So my desk space is, I've got a microscope here just only because some colleagues sometimes come for opinions, so they still use slides. I don't. I look at the screen, which is make my life much easier. And that means also that I can work and report for Kossad Dermatopathology, where I work with Professor Kossad. And, you know, I could be in Poland at the time, and I can report cases, and I can also ask for opinion and collaborate with my colleague live. So because histopathology is still the gold standard, although the clinicians usually know or suspect or they query melanoma, I tell them whether it is melanoma or not. Not meaning I, but histopathologist. Okay, so we've got specific histopathology features, and I'm not going to talk about it too much because I understand you are a bit early in your career as a medical student and you haven't had histopathology. However, I mean, everybody can see that these cells are not nice, they ugly. They form this nest, they form this kind of clusters and migrate upwards and invade the whole thickness of the epidermis. and they're pleomorphic, they have prominent nucleoli, and so I look at all these factors and I tell them whether it's melanoma or not. When I tell them it is melanoma, I make the diagnosis. Then I have to include in my report all the key prognostic features, which is Breslow thickness mainly, ulceration, mitotic rate, tumor infiltrating lymphocytes, regression, lymph node in vascular invasion, lymphovascular invasion, and other features of importance. So it is usually a structured report that includes all these features. This is another example of the nests and clusters and very chaotic, very disorganized. This is a malignant melanoma. So you can see this is the epidermis and the involvement, but we also have very busy dermis, lots of pigment, lots of inflammatory cells. This would look very ugly clinically, and clinician definitely would be very suspicious that the lesion is a melanoma. So I've talked about the main prognostic factor, like histologically, Breslow thickness, depth, which is depth in millimeters, ulceration, mitotic rate. There's also importance of spread of disease status, so sentinel lymph node status, regional lymph nodes involvement, and distal metastases are critical for staging and prognosis. And also factors that are related to patient himself, so age, gender, location of the melanoma, and now in the new era, we've got the molecular features, for example, BRAF mutation. That would all influence the outcome, and not only outcome, but the management strategy and the outcome of the treatment options. So this is the Breslow thickness like diagram. So if I see melanoma, I have to measure it. And if the deeper the melanoma goes, the worse the prognosis and the staging increases as well. Stages of melanoma. So I'm not sure whether you've got the concept of in situ tumor, meaning that it involves only epidermis and is not invasive. And that applies not just to melanoma, but any really skin cancer. So we've got stage 1, which the thin melanoma, typically under 2 millimeters thick, is a low risk, and they localized. Tumors, stage 2 is a thicker melanoma over 2 millimeters, higher risk of metastasis, and still localized. Stage 3 is a regional, so spreads to nearby lymph nodes and vessels, through vessels or skin. And stage 4 is metastatic, spread to distant organs, and could be spreading anywhere: lung, liver, brain, bone, or distant lymph nodes. Just a week ago, I attended a funeral sad event of my neighbor who we loved, who was diagnosed, who had a seizure, and they thought they had stroke, but scans showed a mass. Then the scan revealed another mass in the lung, so they thought it was a lung cancer with metastasis to brain, but the biopsy was taken from the lung, and it turned out to be metastatic melanoma. So he was old, and he lived his life well, typical Aussie with sun damaged skin, lots of moles. The primary melanoma was missed. Nobody picked it up because the skin is so sun damaged that often there is a melanoma, then it metastasizes and primary lesion regresses. So unfortunately, I experienced that firsthand, attending the funeral of my neighbor. Okay, and so the key factors also of staging T and M, so tumor T, nodes N, and metastasis M. So I have a toolbox as a pathologist, histopathologist, and to be honest, most diagnosis of melanoma is dead easy, because the pictures that I showed you are so typical. The cells are atypical, they very easy to diagnose melanoma. However, I diagnose approximately 60 patients a day, and many of those patients are farmers and regional people who come once in a while to Sydney or regional centers, and they get like 15 biopsies taken, and like it could be that many of them are skin cancers and multiple melanomas. And my job, probably 50% of my job, is debating, is something malignant or benign? And why? Because of sun damage makes everything looks atypical. All the population, when something is growing, they tend to scratch it. They tend, lesions tend to bleed. It is very difficult to sometimes decide whether this is malignant feature or benign, and or irritation or scratching. And we use in those circumstances immunohistochemistry. That's my major tool. And I stain the melanocytes, melanocytic markers. And my favorite here is SOX10 antibody that stains nucleus of melanocytes and visualize beautifully the junction, so I can see whether there is pagetoid spread, whether the cells are involved in the full thickness, whether there is like crowding of melanocytes, how many melanocytes. You would not believe how often it is very hard to spot melanocyte at the junction because of keratinocytes also being atypical, and they mask the melanocytic lesions. I am always also on the lookout for melanoma, regardless what kind of biopsy do I get. We use proliferation marker, so higher proliferation marker is associated with malignancy. And one of the newest on the market is PRAME. And this initially was described as a magic tool, immunohistochemistry that stains melanoma and doesn't stain benign lesions. Of course, life shows that is not like that, because there are many, later research showed that many lesions benign lesions like nevi can express PRAME, and vice versa, melanomas can be PRAME negative. But I use the constellation of all these tools and everything, and histopathology appearance, and just mix it all together and debate. And if I'm still unsure, and we often do that, there is no shame to ask for second opinion and discuss with my colleagues. And we do it all the time, because if, say, 5 of us thinks it's melanoma, it is probably a melanoma. If we're still unsure, particularly in the younger population, children, young adults, we send it for an expert opinion to people who deal only with melanomas, and that's Melanoma Center, for example. Where they have access to more sophisticated methods like molecular studies and so on. Okay, I mentioned desmoplastic melanoma, and I mentioned that I am constantly on lookout. I'm on high alert all the time, because I had countless examples that I got the skin biopsy for inflammatory skin, but there was a melanoma. This is actually melanoma. This looks like a scar. It could be easily missed. And one of the tools that if something catches your eye, there's like the dermis is too busy, there are a few lymphocytes, and you do immunohistochemistry for SOX, and there you go. There are melanocytes, atypical ones, spindle, and this is actually mesoplastic melanoma. So I'm always, even if I have solar keratosis or basal cell carcinoma, I always look at the junction, always very carefully assess the scars and other parts of the dermis, because I've learned that so many times it could be easily missed, because the clinician doesn't spot it, because some melanomas are not pigmented, and they may be pink, they may be, in that big sun-damaged skin where there's so many moles, maybe not visible. These are parrots, wildlife. They sit on my balcony looking at the view. I love them dearly, but they are very, very naughty. And when we first came to Australia, we thought they were very cute, and they were, and they still are, and we fed them. However, it turned out that they started coming and destroyed all my wood and everything, so we don't feed them anymore. They also learned how to open the rubbish bins with the beak and the paws, the legs. And when we have rubbish collection every week, they open the rubbish bin and they spread all the rubbish around the streets everywhere to the big embarrassment of owners of that rubbish. And I spotted them. Here is one eating my grapefruit. And then they eat a little bit and they chuck it to my swimming pool, that I have to then clean the swimming pool, and all these grapefruits lying on the ground. So there you go, parrots. Okay, key treatment approaches. The good news is the surgery of thin melanoma is the treatment of choice. And early detected melanoma, it's over 90% treatment success. It's completely curable in early stages. We have also immunotherapy, which is one of the new approaches, which targets actually our own immune system and is introduced usually in advanced or metastatic melanoma. We've got targeted therapy. So this is why the new era of molecular studies is so important, because we are discovering genes and mutations and proteins that could be blocked or unblocked or modulated to actually cure or treat melanoma. Some of the advanced tumors are radiated, and then neoadjuvant therapy is a new thing. So that's the therapy that starts before the surgery, especially for stage 3 melanoma, to improve survival. So before approximately 2011, the outlook was pretty grim for advanced melanoma, and median survival stage 4 was 6 to 9 months. 5-year survival for stage 4, only less than 5%. After 2011, where there was big development of improved chemotherapy regimens, the targeted therapies, immunotherapies, and everything else, improved the median to 5 years. Survival rates were improved from 6 months to 6 years in advanced melanoma. So from the death sentence to almost cure. Not everybody is cured, of course, but there is definite benefit in survival, 5 years survival increase. So the breakthrough was the immunocheckpoint inhibitors. So we've got the normal T cell function, and T cells are activated generally to attack any foreign invaders. That means viruses, bacteria, and also tumor. But tumors are very clever, and they develop this checkpoints evasion to escape immunodetection and destruction. So we've developed treatments that use checkpoint inhibitors, and those inhibitors kind of release the brakes on T cells, allowing them to attack the cancer cells. And so one of them, it could be an example is the tumor suppressor, the cell cycle protein that is important in cell cycle, CTLA-4. And the guy who discovered that was awarded Nobel Prize, and also PD-1 blockade, also Nobel Prize for the researcher. So as I mentioned, 4-stage melanoma, dramatic shift really, from 6 months to 6 years. It's an amazing achievement, and response is 50%. Potential cure, I'm not saying is curable, but potential cure or life extension. Another new approach is that traditionally there was a surgery and then adjuvant therapy, so chemotherapy after the surgery. Now the new approach is the neoadjuvant therapy, so the the chemo before the surgery, then the surgery, and then adjuvant therapy, which could be immunotherapy, could be chemotherapy or other types of therapy. So yes, as I've mentioned, we also have, apart from the checkpoints inhibitors here in this column, we have the amazing discoveries of mRNA vaccine technology. So the mRNA vaccine deliver specific instructions tailored to a patient's unique tumor mutation, allowing the patient itself to target tumor cells and selectively kill the tumor cells, which is a major advance because generally chemotherapy works, it kills the tumor cells, but also kills the normal healthy cells. And the patient is suffering usually from very strong side effects. And that's not just applies to melanoma, but most of the cancers. So the mechanism of action is the injected mRNA is taken up by immunocells, particularly dendritic cells. Then these cells use the instruction to produce neoantigens, the tumor-specific proteins, and then activation. The immune system learns to recognize these neoantigens as dangerous and unleash the attack against melanoma. Okay, so they are delivered in lipid nanoparticles, so to ensure that the molecule reaches the cell cytoplasm safely. And so the adjuvant therapy post-surgery uses for example, mRNA 4157 vaccine in combination with some other reagents in stage 4 and stage 3 melanoma to prevent recurrence and prolong survival. So this is very personalized approach, and it is not just only in melanoma, but this is a revolution happening in cancer treatment all over. And now I would like to mention Professor Richard Scolyer, who is a very well-known pathologist, dermatopathologist in Australia. Okay, so Professor was in May 2023, incidentally, in Poland, and I was at that lecture. There was a conference organized by Artur Zembowicz, also Paul, who lives in States and is a very well-known dermatopathologist. He studied in Krakow years ago, so he wanted to really organize conference. And Professor Scolyer was invited to talk, and he talked for 3 days, many lectures, because he's an amazing guy, a massive research in melanoma, tons of publications, and knows a lot. And what happened that after the meeting, all the speakers were sort of gathering together to trek in Zakopane, and well, Richard didn't get there because he collapsed in his room in a hotel, was taken to Krakow, one of the hospitals. The scans were done, and they discovered mass in the brain. He was flown to Sydney and received a diagnosis of glioblastoma multiforme, which is the most aggressive primary brain tumor. In addition, his tumor turned out to be the most aggressive version of this tumor with the most aggressive mutations. And so you can imagine our community was absolutely shaken. However, this guy is it's basically a hero because I've never met anybody like him. I assumed, because I know him very well, he's very down to earth, very approachable, very chatty and nice chap, basically. And I always thought that he was just focused on his research and he didn't have much of a life, personal life. I was so wrong, because since his diagnosis, Scolyer just recorded all his journey, tests, and massive following on social media, and just to raise awareness of melanoma, of brain tumor, of prevention or treatment, and raise money for the charities, for the research. And what happened? Scolyer did a lot of research into the melanoma stage 3 and 4 treatment, and they got together, his good friend, medical oncologist, and they persuaded his oncologist to actually try the melanoma protocol to the brain tumor. This has not been ever tried before. And the risk was that he dies sooner and would have more pain, more side effects, but he decided to give it a go. And so the decision was made, and he was receiving the neoadjuvant therapy prior to the craniectomy and then operation and adjuvant therapy. He received personalized mRNA neoantigen vaccine and some other chemo and plus radiotherapy. There was, as I mentioned, there was no prior attempt to such radical treatment in brain cancer. It generated amazing response all over the world. The researchers were puzzled and impressed, and it initiated, this work actually initiated clinical trials, which have started right now in the States. Richard had no evidence of tumor recurrence, so after 12 months, and he was given like approximately 3 months to live. He was still not only returned to work and returning to clinical work and public advocacy. He also started I've learned that he was also a runner, ran marathons and triathlons, and he started running again and raising money. Amazing person, and very impressive. Both of them actually earned Australian of the Year award in 2024. So these are his words when he appeared on a television program that the whole nation watched, that he said he spent his whole career looking down the microscope, and he never expected that to see this from the other side as a patient. And he said, going back, he didn't have any symptoms. Even going back and knowing that he got this tumor, he was running, he was doing his activities, he was working, no single symptoms, until that collapse in Poland. And he actually wanted to have a crack. He said, I wanted to have a crack at this, because if I even help one person, it's got to be worth it. So moving now, slowly to the end of our chat here, I will talk about the prevention, and that's incredibly important, because in Australia, they identified the problem, high rate of melanomas, capital of the world, the highest incident in the world. And in 80s, they introduced, it was initiated by Cancer Research Organization, and together with the government, there was a big public initiative called Slip, Slop, Slap. And because of that massive campaign, there have been incredible changes in the rate of melanoma. So you can see in this graph, okay, so the blue are still older population, so they grew up in raw Aussie kind of environment, barbecues and sports, no sunscreen, no hats, and they paying the price. But the awareness started to raise in 80s, and you see how much there is a decrease in the younger population under 40 in incidence in melanoma. So this is the campaign. Slip means put your clothes on, protective clothes, so there's long sleeves, t-shirts and so on. Cover yourself on the beach, and in generally everywhere you go, you are exposed to the sun. Wear sun, slop your screen on liberally, and repeat every 2 hours, and particularly after swimming or sweating, because it is not water resistant. Slap meaning put your hat on. Okay, wear broad brim hat at all times that covers face, head, and neck and ears. Seek the shade, stay in the shade specifically when the index of UV is high, and slide your glasses on. So this campaign with Cancer Council and basically Live Sun Smart campaign made incredible changes in Australia from 1981 onwards. So at school, there is a policy, no hat, no play. In Australia, every school's got their unique uniform and different colors, could be blue, red, orange, whatever. But both the primary and the secondary high schools, they have specific uniforms. You can't just go to school dressed like whatever you want. And in primary school, they wear those broad brim hats. And if somebody forgets the hat, they cannot go outside. And the sun protection is the first thing they learn when they come to school, about staying in the shade, the sunscreen, the hats, and so on. Every outside area in the school, but also in a park. There is so many parks everywhere in Sydney. There are big shades, big trees to protect from the sun. And it's very comprehensive sun protection. So that's all the Sun Smart program. These are my kids when they were, I hope they forgive me, but they were in primary school. They wore these hats. This is the normal outfit every day, and this is a sport outfit. I mean, my kids are now adults, but that when they were in primary school. Australia, it's the first country that banned solarium. And a single solarium, I don't know whether it's still available in Poland, but increases by 59% the risk of melanoma. And it was banned in 2015 in one of the states, Victoria, and in 2016, everybody else followed. And before the ban, solarium was estimated to cause 281 new melanoma cases and 43 deaths every year. And then ban is expected to reduce lifetime melanoma incidence by 3.7% and other skin cancers too. So this is quite a significant figure. Okay, so this is almost the end of my presentation, and just as a summary, right? The problem, they identified the problem. There is extreme sun exposure. This climate is not really the most suitable climate for fair-skinned people. There is this outdoor cultures because the weather is beautiful. It's almost always sunny. And, there are so many days that you spend outdoors. And I can testify because since I came to Australia in 2009, my skin had no lentiginous and nothing. Now I have lentiginous on my face and on my hands because I spend a lot of time outdoors. I'm not going to be stuck indoors. I do put sunscreen. I run with the hat, but I spend a lot of time in the bush, running and walking and trekking mountains and whatever. And there is this sun exposure is all the time. So the problem is still there, but it is targeted. It's been targeted. It was been addressed appropriately. So the response was the slip, slop, slap, sun smart, solarium ban, no hut, no plane, and declining rates in the young. And the science, Australian researcher, Melanoma Institute, the team led by Richard Scolyer, developed this incredible advances in immunotherapy and targeted therapy for stage 3 and 4 melanoma. And thank you for, due to their scientific research and incredible work, patients are enjoying longer life and possibly increased rate of cure. So what should you remember from this lecture? I would love you to remember is that radiation is the #1 preventable cause of melanoma, and it's relevant in Poland too. I go to Europe quite often, and particularly for conferences and meetings. And I was in Vienna last year. It was really, really hot. And I was the only person, and I was with some friends, also medical doctors from Poland, from my medical, old friends. And it was really hot on the street. I was the only person wearing hat because I'm so paranoid. Well, not paranoid, but so is ingrained in my head that I've got to wear hat, I've got to wear longer sleeves, and I've got to wear my sunscreen. Everybody else was just going out there, no problem. But early detection saves lives. Yes, the difference between 99% and 23 survivors is this stage at diagnosis. The pathology report, it's crucial for the management and the roadmap for treatment and the parameters which are important, such as breast low ulceration, mitosis, lymph nodes, and so on. If you could remember that immunotherapy and neoadjuvant therapy has transformed the treatment and increased survival in stage 4 melanoma, and prevention works takes a generation. So we now, 25 years later, we're seeing significant reduction in melanoma cases due to this campaign in 1980. Research saved lives, and where I would like you to remember, wear sunscreen and hat, even in Poland, especially on your holiday. Don't go and bake and have a sunburn, because this is very relevant. Talk about Australia wouldn't be worth it without a kangaroo, and notice the joy the little baby the mom has in the pouch. And that's Vineyard, the golf course in Hunter Valley. I didn't mention yet, I had a slide, but it disappeared. I don't know how, but I did have a slide regarding another mode of prevention in Australia is the easy access to doctors. So there is generally dermatologists would be diagnosing melanoma, but there are not enough dermatologists. So there are GPs who specialize in skin, and these are the first doctors who are diagnosing. They very good in dermoscopy. They do the surgery, and they send us cases to. If the case is difficult to manage and remove, then the patient is referred to dermatologist or referred to. If there is a higher stage like 3 or 4 melanoma, they referred to melanoma unit for multidisciplinary care, which means the patient is under the care of oncologist, dermatologist, radiotherapist, pathologist, occupational therapists, nurses, and plastic surgeons, and the team is working together to save this patient and provide the best possible care. This picture is my local marina, and I go there very often. It's my happy place to reset after a heavy day at work. And I go there and I sit and just listen to birds and listen to the noise in marina and see the fish. And I'm coming back home completely renewed. So, yeah, this is it. Thank you so much for your attention. And I hope that I inspired you, and I hope that you be curious. And you are very early at the stage of your medical studies, but I encourage you to be curious, to have dreams. And when I've started my journey as a doctor postgraduate, I came to England, and I was nobody. Until I've done my PhD, I was nobody. Poland wasn't even, they didn't even want to talk to me. The diploma, Polish diploma meant nothing. Now, Poland is very much on the map, is appreciated, is recognized for its rich culture, history, great education, and lovely people. So you have opportunities, and take them, just grab them, go and spend some time overseas, and then go back to Poland. I should have done it, but now it's a bit too late. But go back to Poland, because Poland needs you. And thank you so much again for this opportunity.
Bardzo dziękujemy Pani Doktor za wspaniały wykład i mam nadzieję, że jeszcze kiedyś będzie okazja spotkać się z Panią. Bardzo dziękujemy. Do widzenia.
Dziękuję.